I read that text a month ago, before the presidential election, and I thought, oh, I can't wait to preach about this text, this apocalyptic text. And I was going to tell you all that we should do everything we can to force the Harris administration to do things we think ought to be done. So now I'm not going to talk about that. Instead, we'll talk about a few other things. Here is the great American poet Robert Zimmerman, Bob Dylan. 1989, he released this album that was, some people would say is a kind of a comeback, but more of just more evolution of the same person. This album called Oh Mercy. I'm going to read you two songs from that album. I wish I was a DJ. I wish I had like a little, I would just play this music for you. We live in a political world where love don't have any place. We're living in times where men commit crimes and crime don't have a face. We live in a political world, icicles hang down, wedding bells ring and angels sing and clouds cover up the ground. We live in a political world, wisdom is thrown in jail. It rots in a cell, misguided as hell, leaving no one to pick up the trail. We live in a political world where mercy walks the plank. Life is in mirrors, death disappears up the steps of the nearest bank. We live in a political world in the cities of lonesome fear. Little by little you turn in the middle, but you never are sure why you're here. We live in a political world, everything is hers and his, climbs into the frame and shouts God's name, but you're never sure what it is. I think the next song after that. Broken lines, broken strings, broken threads, broken springs, broken idols, broken heads, people sleeping in broken beds. Ain't no use jiving, ain't no use joking, everything is broken. Broken bottles, broken plates, broken switches, broken gates, broken dishes, broken parts, streets filled with broken hearts, broken words never meant to be spoken, everything is broken. Seems like every time you stop and turn around, something else just hits the ground. Broken cutters, broken saws, broken buckles, broken laws, broken bodies, broken bones, broken voices on broken phones. Take a deep breath. Feel like you're choking. Everything is broken. Every time you leave and go off someplace, things fall to pieces in my face. Broken hands on broken plows, broken treaties, broken vows, broken pipes, broken tools, people bending broken rules, hound dog howling, bullfrog croaking, everything is broken. So I imagine most of you are still sort of, in whatever way you are, coming to grips with, coming to terms with the result of the election, the ramifications for our most vulnerable neighbors. Are you? And most of us probably feel like many, many things are broken. And it is, by terms, laughable and terrifying as little policy promises trickle out and as appointments are made to the cabinet and invented cabinet positions. And if it weren't so serious, it would be hilarious. A clown show. A clash of alpha males. It will be interesting to watch it self-destruct. Broken pieces and hit lots of people who don't need to be hit by broken pieces. So I read this text a month ago, and I had a great idea of how I could talk to you about making sure that we press the new administration and hold them accountable for environmental stuff, for more compassionate and just border policy, for some change in the way the United States interacts with Gaza. I thought maybe we could have that, but that's not what we get. This text was foreordained in some sense. Now, I'm not saying it's foreordained that God sat down and wrote this down sometime in ancient prehistory so that you all could hear it today because this is the text for the day. But every once in a while, stuff coalesces together and works very nicely. And it almost makes you think that maybe God is in each moment, working each moment, moving things along. That every moment that touches every other moment becomes this moment. Maybe. This election wasn't foreordained. It wasn't planned. I think of it rather like this. I was reading a science fiction novel about a city on Mercury that runs around the middle of Mercury, and it's just ahead of the sun. Because, you know, the sun kind of, as it moves around Mercury, it's hot. I don't know if you all know this. I've never been there, but I've read it's very hot. So you're right on the edge of the sunshine and the darkness, and they keep ahead, and it's on these tracks, and the tracks expand as the sun hits it and pushes the city just away from the sun, destroying it. And then one day, it's destroyed by this big meteor, and no one saw it coming. They have this big defense system to shoot down meteors, and as the investigators try to figure out what happened, they realize that someone at various points in the past shot little tiny rocks at a very specific place in the solar system that just happened to be where Mercury was going to be and the city was going to be, and the city's destroyed by this giant rock that is a coalescing of lots of little rocks, and it just happened to come together in this one place. I know I'm not a Democrat, but I know that the Democrats are going to do what they always do. They are going to try to debrief all of this and figure out who to blame, right? And the people they're going to blame are the most vulnerable people. They will blame the people who are not responsible, and they will make it about something other than figuring out how to do something different. Now, the difference may be between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, at least in their modern forms, is that at least the Democrats try to think about why something happened and who to blame. But they'll blame the wrong people. They will blame the most vulnerable. They will say we were too woke, even though they ran an election or ran a campaign from the center. They'll probably blame Biden's modest moves to do something about student debt, blame trans people. They will blame these anemic overtures toward addressing climate change. All of those things will happen. But the election was not foreordained. It wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't. I shouldn't say it's supposed to happen. It wasn't meant to happen. But maybe we should talk about something lighter. Let's talk about apocalypse. That feels better. Feels easier. Apocalypse is this sort of it's sort of a genre in fiction, right? So it is kind of exciting. It's always fun when the world falls apart, because maybe I would be one of those people that survived. Maybe I could be one of those people running away from zombies or living in a nuclear waste, or maybe I would be living at the top of a building after the entire seacoast has been flooded. How exciting. You know, like, I don't like it when, whatever doesn't work, right? My internet goes out for an hour, I feel like the apocalypse is upon me. So all of this, we could survive this post-apocalyptic stuff, is very silly. We also use it as a lens for understanding things that happen. When we talk about post-apocalypse, we are living in post-apocalyptic times. We are living post-Black Death in Europe. A third of the population died, and it formed very much the modern world that we live in. We are living on a continent where 90% of the human population was wiped out, accidentally and intentionally. And it's the intentional part that's really problematic. We are living post-apocalyptic. I won't read you another song lyric, but one of my favorite bands is called Dead Pioneers. They're an indigenous American band. And they have a song that talks about living through the apocalypse. You're all waiting for the apocalypse, but we're living it, is how they phrase it. Apocalypse is this kind of, originally, this kind of literary genre, right? It's a way of thinking about the world. It wants to strip the skin off the world and see the broken bones and the failing organs and the rotting teeth. It wants to see the carcass of what the world is, what it means to live in empires. It's an ancient art form, but it has very modern applications because we still live in empire. We still live in a world that has rot at the center of it. And Apocalypse wants to strip that away, and it wants to look at what the possibilities are for the future, of what new thing could be created. And this is probably where, and I hate to tell you all this is where Apocalypse departs from the liberal project. The liberal project hopes that progress is inevitable. It hopes that it is foreordained, that it was meant to be, that it has to be. We talk often about people who are on the wrong side of history. You're only on the wrong side of history if history goes the way you want it to go. But there's nothing guaranteed about that. We truly believe that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. But we don't remember that we are also responsible to grab a hold of it and pull it toward justice. We just think it's going to happen. It has to happen so we can sit back. That's where apocalypse differs from the liberal project. Sorry, liberals. But that's the reality of it. Apocalypse recognizes that the world grinds on using greed and power over and retribution. That power over protects lots of us from harm because it harms others for us. It pushes the harm back and away. But it also imagines how things might be. And we don't get quite there in this little reading from the Gospel of Mark, but it's there and it happens. It imagines the world as a new one. Antonio Gramsci, put that on your bingo card, Paul. Antonio Gramsci was an Italian Marxist, not communist, kind of an anarchist. Anyway, he got arrested by the fascists, shockingly enough, died in an Italian prison. But he's known for saying this: the old world is dying and the new one is struggling to be born. Now is the time of monsters. At least that's what Slavoj Žižek said he said. He didn't really say that. What he really said was this: the crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. In the interregnum, no wonder we changed that. In the interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. Okay, I mean, that sounds not as exciting. Maybe Slavoj was right. Maybe he was kind of using this loose French translation which said the old world is dying, the new world is slow to appear. And in this light, dark, monsters emerge. All of those mean slightly different things. I think that maybe Zizek's paraphrase is more hopeful. The old world is dying and the new one is struggling to be born. Not that it can't be born, not that it refuses to appear. And monsters is a much better image than morbid symptoms, right? You can imagine monsters. Morbid symptoms just sounds very, well, what should we do about that? How can we treat this? Monster, you run away from monsters. You fight monsters. Morbid symptoms you treat. Maybe there's something to that. Apocalypse brings this clarity and brings this imagery of stones being torn down, of fire going out. So in this story, Jesus and his disciples, who are very much country bumpkins, are wandering around the big old city and marveling at the size of things. And Jesus predicts that very shortly all of this will be gone. Now it's probable that whoever wrote the Gospel of Mark was writing after Jerusalem had been destroyed. Writing after 70 AD, when the Roman Empire brought the apocalypse into Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, ruined the center of religious life. What does it mean to be Jewish? Well, it means something else after 70 AD because the apocalypse came and destroyed everything for those folks. But the story we're reading is set before that. And Jesus says all of this stuff will be torn down. Now, there is an anti-Semitic trope in Christianity. Well, sometimes I worry that Christianity is an anti-Semitic trope. But let's hope it's not. But there is indeed within Christianity this anti-Semitic trope that says the Jews almost got it right but got it wrong. And then Jesus got it right and fixed it and made it work. But I think that reduces the Jews to one sort of motive, one sort of understanding, one way of being in the world, which we know isn't true. If you know any Jews, you know that's not true. If you know any history, you know that's not true. And it also reduces Jesus to one motive and one way of being in the world. So we want to be very careful. But Jesus does seem to have lived in solidarity with the Essenes. They were a group of people who lived outside of the entire system. They rejected the temple sacrifices, so corrupt that you couldn't follow this anymore. And they were waiting for something apocalyptic. They weren't preparing themselves for war. They weren't preparing a revolution. They were living alongside of the empire, outside of it. doing their own thing, making their own way. And I think Jesus was inviting people into a very similar way of being. He slots into that world of rejecting corruption and embracing tradition in ways that bring life to people. Jesus is an apocalyptic preacher. He is coming along to expose the world for what it is, to strip the skin away. So this text would be ours today, no matter who won or lost the presidential election. Apocalypse is real, no matter what all of those things, because apocalypse is rooted in pushing back against empire, pushing back against all of those things. So the immediate concern for us now is the needs of our neighbors who don't have adequate documentation. I saw a little meme, by the way, recently that said, I have a friend who says that she knows undocumented people, and I don't know how that's possible because I don't think that's true. None of us know anyone who's undocumented, do we? Do you all know any undocumented people?
No.
I don't know who those people are. Keep that in mind. We don't know. Our immediate concern is for people who don't have adequate documentation. We don't know who they are. But that doesn't mean that it ends there. In this apocalyptic moment, we are going to need to pool everything we have together to create this new world. Because while apocalyptic visions often imagine divine intervention from the outside, the Christian vision of apocalypse imagines divine intervention from inside, from within, not from outside. I like to make this contrast between power over and power under, but I was talking to Joe the other day, who every once in a while has very wise and insightful things to say. Usually when he's talking. And he said, power under, power over, what about power with? And then I had to sit down and be quiet for a while. Because that, I think, is what the gospel is. It is about power together. Yeah, it's about power moving under, but it's about power moving with and together. It is about being in solidarity with the divine impulse and with our neighbors, both and. The historian John Dominic Crossan says, the part of the Christian story is we're sitting around waiting for God to act, and maybe God is on a different street corner waiting for us to show up too. So how will we show up in these apocalyptic moments? Where will we be? How will we find ourselves coming together despite the machinations of all the power brokers in the world? And it doesn't matter who the power brokers are, because our role is to be with the divine impulse and with our neighbors. So while everything might seem and be, not even seem, let me take that back. While everything may be broken, that's where hope begins. Hope is only possible when things are hopeless. Hope is only possible when the cross is empty and the stone is rolled in front of the tomb. That's when hope begins. So now is a hopeful time. Not hope in like butterflies and rainbows, although I do like butterflies and rainbows. And we sang a little bit about rainbows this morning. Yes, let's see them. Get those butterfly wings up there. That brings hope. So let me take it back. I do mean butterflies and rainbows. But I don't want to be, I don't think we need to bury our heads in the sand and hope. We need to be out and active and filled with hope, even when everything is hopeless. Amen? Amen. Amen.